Hey guys, my name is Mauro Stara and today we're going to break down Paul Saladino's blood work and looking a little bit more on some of the things that he said, which I think overall was very good, but a few things that I disagree with and other things that I think Paul can improve and get a much better ROI from certain changes in his labs and with his diet, supplementation, and any lifestyle practices there. So first things first, this is not medical advice. This is just my personal opinion with some studies that I'm going to show you. So there are no recommendations. There's no medical advice on that. I'm a health coach and also CEO of Six Pack CEO, and we work with men over 40, helping them get back in shape. And we look at a lot of blood work and lab. And I saw some things on Paul's video that I thought he may find interesting and valuable to look at even further, that I think was a little bit overlooked, and we can dive right into this. All right, so here we are on his YouTube video, Blood Work Review, April 2024. I haven't seen his other labs or the DEXA scan that he mentioned, but we're just gonna start here with that and then move along. So he starts here with his white blood cells, red blood cell count, CBC, and overall looks very, very good from what I'm seeing here. Red blood cells, oxygen, white blood cells, more like the immune system, or is the immune system your firewall for protection. So if you get sick a lot, that's an indication that your immune system can be supported a little bit better here. But yeah, from Paul, looks overall good. Hematocrit was a little high. He talked about that with the iron, so no concern here. It can also be a little bit of dehydration when I look at his electrolyte status. But what I see here when we scroll down are the monocytes. So monocytes, EOS, eosinophils, and basophils, and especially the EOS is quite elevated. I like to see that under 3, and usually when that's elevated, that's like a sign of food sensitivities, allergies, asthma, potential of a parasite, given the monocyte is elevated or monocytes are elevated, EOS are elevated, and basophils are also at a 1. That could be a potential sign of an intestinal parasite, given Paul eats a lot of raw meat, raw liver. He lives in Costa Rica, so he goes swimming and spends some time there in the water, in let's say lakes, waterfalls there around that. I think that could be a potential sign there, but given his childhood history of years or decade-long history of asthma and eczema, he may not have any more of the symptoms, but it could be that there's still a potential sign there. So I would probably audit the diet, even though his diet is pretty much perfect, at least in his eyes, and I think the food quality that he's getting there is pretty good, the micronutrients, so I don't doubt that. But it could be that there's something he's added to his diet, whether it's a fruit or maybe it's a dairy, like something there that is elevating these here. But at the end of the day, if his symptoms are great, he feels great, he's thriving, and that number is just a little bit elevated and he has no symptoms at all, I wouldn't make a too big deal out of it. Same for the parasites. Like if he has no symptoms of an infection with parasites, then it may just be that he has a higher baseline and that's just a little bit elevated, and we can leave this alone here. All right, let's move on. Glucose, bond, creatine levels. I think everything he said here, I recommend you watch the full video. It was a very, very good breakdown. Is accurate and is overall very good. The filtering system, he's supplementing with creatine monohydrate, I think. So this is all fine. Bun as well, protein digestion or dehydration. So really nothing to add here. All right, so electrolyte status, sodium, potassium chloride. So sodium and chloride together give you salt. So when you increase your salt intake, the two always go up. Given, we have here the range for chloride, and that can also be a sign a lot of times of stomach acid, CO2 here as well, and sodium, I believe he could benefit from a little bit more salt in his diet to get those numbers up there, and also adding a little bit more foods that are rich in potassium, getting it a little bit closer to the 4.5 range, because you want to think about it this way. If you're sweating a lot, let's say you live in New York and your electrolyte status is like it's within the range, but it's at the very bottom of the range, and now you go for 1-2 weeks to Florida, or you're just sweating a lot, and your hydration status drops, and you may feel a little bit dizzy, you feel weaker, you have more cravings, you just don't feel at your peak. So I believe he would, one, perform better with the surfing, with his workouts, if we add a little bit more salt, and number two, with the potassium here, if we added a little bit more foods rich in potassium, so plantains, bananas, white potatoes, I think he doesn't eat them. Sweet potatoes, possibly he eats them, probably not. Coconut water, I know he has that, maybe a little bit more to get the potassium up, because he's out a lot, Costa Rica, hot, humid, sweaty. I believe he benefit a little bit more from that, and just seeing how he feels biofeedback wise with that adjustment there. And that's the only thing I would add here. Looking down, protein, total protein looks solid. Is always a composition of albumin and globulin, and alkaline phosphate can also be a marker for zinc deficiency, potentially magnesium deficiency, so it doesn't seem to be the case here. This is great. AST, ALT is fine. I think his AST could be a little bit lower. I know Paul said that's mainly liver marker, but sometimes AST can also represent visceral fat or fat around the heart or muscle tissue there. Given he did a DEXA scan, 10.5% body fat, visceral fat, very low, that's ruled out. Again, may just be that it's a little bit elevated here with him. It's still within range, but I see those two, when they're fully optimized, often go hand in hand. If someone has higher AST to ALT ratio, it can also be alcoholic fatty liver. So if it's over 1, given Paul doesn't drink this, or at least what he says, this can be ruled out here, and I don't think there's any further investigation for that. Last thing here, CRP, high sensitivity protein, C-reactive protein. So what this test measures is it looks at your blood vessels, and around your blood vessels there are proteins attached to it. The more proteins attached to around your blood vessels, the higher the level of inflammation that you have. So we always want to keep that lower than 1 when we look at this here, but when we look at functional medicine ranges, they're even 0 to 0.5. So he's not very inflamed, and there's nothing like wrong there, so to say, but there's very, very slight inflammation happening. I like to see that lower. Given, he works out a lot, he's very active, it could just be from the training, and that's just a normal response and adaptation. I don't think it's from the diet or sleep or any of his habits. So most likely that's from that there. Very, very important blood marker to look at, to also look, hey, do I have like oxidative stress? And how's, the overall inflammation for heart health, longevity, very, very important blood marker. Not the regular CRP, but as the one that Paul got, HS, high sensitivity CRP. A1C, overall pretty good. I think it could be lower, but just to have like a threshold, like given he's 10.5% body fat, let's say he would bulk up, he would say, hey, I'm gonna put on more muscle mass, go into muscle building phase, and start eating more, overeating. That number will shoot high, and we'll get closer like 5.6, and then 5.7, we're already pre-diabetic range. I would want to keep it lower during the cut, and then during the bulk you have a threshold that you can go up, so you're still metabolically very healthy, very insulin sensitive as you go into the bulk. But given, I don't think Paul does a lot on body recomp. He stays pretty much in the same shape year in, year out. So this is totally fine, and I don't see any further concern. But if he said, hey, I'm going to go up to 15% body fat and really bulk, get up to like 180, 190 pounds, put on some size, there's going to be a little bit of fat gain with that, and the risk of the increase in body fat, but also the increase in overall calories will elevate the A1C, and again, we're getting then very close to 5.6, 5.7, and that's not any more optimal there. So if we get a little bit lower before, let's say, someone will go in a bulk, you have a bigger threshold. So he says here, main glucose over the last 12 weeks, or calculated glucose on average, 111. That just calculated. He said these are the peaks. That's just calculation. Unless you wear a CGM or take blood from your finger blood measurements, then that's just a calculation. They're an estimate. Given we have the glucose at, I think, 88, 89, that's the marker you want to go with. The difference also is fasted glucose is your sugar overnight, so last 12 hours approximately. Not always the best indication. If you had like ice cream and fries the night before and you had like 2-3 hours of sleep, your sugar will be way more high than on a regular night. Where A1C is a little bit better because it gives you the calculated sugar over the last 3 to 4 months. So kind of like in the stock market, you don't care if Apple or Nvidia goes up and down today. You care more where is it trending over the last 3 months and where did it trend over the last 3 months to make a better informed decision. Unless you're a day trader, then you do care about that, but there's no day trading with blood work. So we care more about the averages and those types of indications versus just looking at it from a day-to-day perspective. All right, thyroid and lipids. So we don't have the complete thyroid here. He has it a little bit more lower, so I'm going to comment on that here. Lipids, cholesterol, slightly elevated when we look at the reference range, and triglycerides are fine. I like to see them more in the 70 range, but really no concern here with that number. HDL as well is fine. LDL 151. So Paul on this video showed some really good studies, and overall agree with his argument. I think LDL has been very demonized by a lot of people, where there's more context needed than just looking at it at, oh, the LDL is high, this is gonna happen. It's a potential risk factor, but I share the same belief, and based on the evidence that also Paul shared here, that if your metabolic health is fine, the risk is very, very low unless you have genetic factors at play. Obviously, it can always happen, right? So it's important to look at other markers. But one study that he didn't show, and I want to share this here, is this one here. Maybe he showed it in other videos, but I've never heard him talk about that one. And I thought this was a really very interesting study from 2021. They looked at a group of 19,000 people over 15 years. So very big group of people, 15 years. This is not some, let's look at 30 guys and check them out for a week to, no, like 15 years, 19,000 people. And what they did is they divided them into 3 groups, Group A, Group B, Group C. And they looked at their LDL cholesterol levels, and they found those with LDL 130 to 159 had the lowest risk of mortality, where those with LDL under 70 had the highest risk of mortality, followed by those with 70 to 99, and then those over 160. So ignoring LDL completely and saying, it doesn't matter, that's not the way we want to see it. But the way I see it here is, if you're between 100 and 159, again, this is just one study. Pretty sure there are a lot of others that counter argument can be made, but it's a very big group and significant study, and they divided them into 3 mini groups, and you can see all of them came to the same conclusion. Like the ratios in percentages are a little bit different, but the correlation here, like 1.7, 1.6, and 1.3, they're always the highest when LDL was the lowest. It's not that this group was high here and then low here. No, like this number here, 130, 159, on all 3 in all three groups was the lowest. So I haven't heard a lot of people like Peter Attia or others talk about this one here, a lot of cardiologists. So I wonder why. Ball goes out to a lot of cardiologists here on, what disagreement they would have with this study, because this kind of flips the whole model on top of it and is a very, very strong counter argument. So as I said, I wouldn't say ignore it completely, but when I look at his numbers here, given his metabolic health is very good, spends a lot of time in nature, is outside, fresh air, sunlight, sleep, diet quality, I really don't see personally any concern here for this number. I listened to the podcast that he was on with Derek from More Plates, More Dates, and talking about statins and other cholesterol lowering medication and hedging against it. Again, there's a case to be made there in certain groups, in my opinion, but for Paul, I really don't see an issue here. So 100% share his philosophy and belief and argument with that. So here Paul goes on and talks about cortisol and DHEA ratio, where he shows his DHEA levels and his cortisol, and then looks at the ratio and makes the argument, hey, the lower that ratio is, the better it is for longevity and the mortality risk is down. While there's truth to that, I wouldn't see that as a strong argument. Here's why. Your cortisol is not linear during the day. So I'll show you a graphic. So this is what it looks like what your cortisol curve, or what the cortisol curve looks like in a healthy circadian rhythm, which is your inner biological clock, when you're in sync with the sun and light exposure and so on. And if we look at cortisol melatonin graph, we can see it here perfectly as well. So what happens is in the morning, when you wake up, cortisol is very, very high, and that's what it should be. That's how you wake up naturally. If cortisol is very low, you feel like very tired, very groggy, very sleepy in the morning. And then it drops around 9:30, goes down, and then around 3, 4 a.m. it starts building back up, and there's that natural awakening response. Vice versa, melatonin goes down during the day, and then after sunset it starts to build up and go high and high, high, and it makes you more sleepy and feel feel more tired, sleepy, and this is what helps you fall asleep, but also, depending, stay asleep. So if we look at that ratio there with, basically Paul said, higher levels of DHEA and the lower cortisol, the better. That's really contextual, because what time of the day are we measuring cortisol? I'm going to assume this has been morning blood work that is done based on the glucose and everything, and not some blood work during the day. And in the morning, I don't want my cortisol to be low. There was a time where my cortisol was very low and I barely could get out of bed. I was so tired, and it took me a while to get started, so to say. And a lot of people have that. They go to bed too late. They have a lot of blue light exposure. They're not in sync with their circadian rhythm. And what's going to happen is that their cortisol is low in the morning and then very high at night. They have a racing mind. They can't fall asleep. So that's like inverse. So if we take someone like that and say, hey, your cortisol and DHEA ratio is very good because your cortisol in the morning is low, well, what about the nighttime cortisol? So I don't agree with this argument. There are too many variables there, and I think there are better metrics to look at for longevity. Yes, DHEAS is important, but I definitely don't agree with this argument here. A much better test for cortisol is this one here, 4-point cortisol test, saliva test. People who've done like a Dutch test or saliva test, they're familiar with that. And basically you get like a small box like this one here, and there's like 4 openings. Usually it's well, depending on which brand, but usually it's like around 7, 8 a.m. and then lunchtime, so 8 a.m., 12, 3, 4 p.m., and then the last one is done before you go to bed, and you measure it there. There are others which are like 9 a.m., 12, 3, and 6, so it really depends. But yeah, that's the 4-point cortisol test, and it gives you the 4 points, it gives you your curve, and that's much better of a measurement for cortisol than just the blood work, because yeah, in the morning it may be low, but we don't want it super low in the morning. I like to see it anywhere from like 10 to 15, where in the day it should drop, and not increase. And a lot of people in today's day and age, they have low morning cortisol and then it increases at night, and they can't sleep because their circadian rhythm is so out of alignment, and that's much a more important indicator of optimal health than just going by that ratio there. So don't share this argument, but let's move on. So here Paul makes the argument for his high cholesterol, lipids, and we can skip that section here. Already commented on that and my findings as well. So next thing, vitamin D. Vitamin D is pretty solid. I like to see it 80 to 90. Can be better here. ApoB again goes into the cholesterol discussion, so I won't further comment on that. Fasted insulin, pretty solid from what I'm seeing here, 3.6. I like to see between 2 and a 5. Let's say you're at 10% body fat, you're done cutting for a body recomp person, then 2, 3 is really solid, where if you're in a bulk, 4, 5 is like the peak, and when you see it's going higher and higher and higher, you're getting a little bit insulin resistant, so it's good to switch back and reduce a little bit body fat, or change your macros and maybe go a little bit higher with the fats, lower with the carbs, what type of carbs you're having, improving sleep, just looking at those metrics so you have a better nutrient partitioning for those wanting to put on muscle mass and bulk. Ferritin is okay. I think most men, as Paul said, feel really good when their ferritin is around 80, maybe 70 here, under 100 for sure. Uric acid is fine as well. Very happy to see that. High uric acid can always increase the risk of gout, so want to check that as well. What I was surprised was homocysteine. Well, kind of surprised. But homocysteine is an amino acid, and it's a byproduct of methylation. So if that's elevated, that means some of your methyl donors are missing, or you're just not getting enough from those. And if we look at the chart, we can see here a really good chart on the folate cycle. So a lot of people these days are exposed to MTHFR and their genetic mutations. And we see it here, folate, vitamin B9, and methionine cycle here. And you have these two cycles that are methylating. And we have here the methionine cycle, which is mainly kickstarted or fed by protein, gets converted into SAMe. And the two very important nutrients here are choline and betaine. And what happens is a lot of people that have an MTHFR mutation, they don't get enough vitamin B9 in, and then their choline mainly goes out there and helps and supports and takes over more of the methylation. So think about like two teams in basketball or football, soccer, whatever sports you're watching, and one team is injured, so the other team goes out and helps. But the other team also has their own duty to fulfill, and choline is very important to for phospholipids, digesting fats, clearing fat from the liver. So if you don't get enough choline and you have non-alcoholic fatty liver, then it may be that you're choline deficient, but you're not deficient in the sense of because you're not getting it from your diet. It just too much is getting used to support this pathway here. So if you optimize this pathway here, this pathway will work better, and choline can fulfill its main role, which is not always methylating, but also with fat metabolism, clearing fat from the liver, and so on. So when Paul's homocysteine, which we can see here, HCY, is elevated, that's exactly what's happening, that he's missing some nutrients here. Choline has to work really hard and support this cycle here, and it just, the homocysteine is building up and up and up. And why is that a risk factor? Before we look why that's happening and what we can change, why is it a risk factor? Why is homocysteine so important? Well, if we look here, we have one study here that shows homocysteine folate risk of Alzheimer's disease. This is a meta-analysis. You can read that on your own. It says here potential predictors, so it's not like a conclusive evidence, but it's one of many studies. Homocysteine as a risk factor for Alzheimer's here as well. Increased homocysteine, strong independent risk factor for developing dementia and Alzheimer's. One here as well, homocysteine and the risk of a stroke, meta-analysis, and we have here down the conclusion as well. It indicates that patients with a stroke have high levels of homocysteine. Obviously, that shows that it's, or that could potentially indicate that it's not causation, meaning, okay, if you have this, then this is going to happen. But again, a lot of signs and factors there. It's a little bit newer, or less, not newer, but less studied, less sophisticated. So as more research comes out, I believe we'll have stronger evidence there as well. But this one here too, we have here homocysteine and stroke risk, and we see it here as well in the Chinese population. Effects of homocysteine first stroke was significantly modified by the genetic mutation here and supplementation with basically vitamin B9, its bioavailable form, so methylfolate. And last one here, plasma homocysteine, a risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer. Again, conclusion is a strong independent risk factor here. So nobody wants that. My grandma had dementia. It was very, very sad. I would walk in there, she was like 83, 84, and 83, 82, and she wouldn't recognize me, and it's very, very sad. So very, very important blood marker to look at. And aside from not recognizing, like, there's a lot of other symptoms there, but I think that's like one of the most important things when you have grandkids, and we want to make sure we know, okay, this is my grandson, not like I'm lost and that's it. And Paul is quite elevated, and the reason I said I was surprised is he eats a lot of, when we look here and go back, he eats a lot of B12. His B12 status is very good from the red meat, and B6 as well. You get a lot in meat, maybe a little bit more in white meat, but I don't think he's deficient here in vitamin B6. And then we have vitamin B9, folate. So you get that mainly from liver. You don't really get that from muscle meat and dark leafy greens. We know Paul stands on that, so he's not going to have those. But if you have a lot of liver, that's fine. Given he eats liver daily, and I think heart as well, which will cover the B2, I was a little bit surprised. So either the meats that he's eating, the organs, are not as nutrient dense as they should be. So maybe change the farmer and see if that improves. Or he's missing one key nutrient, and that's betaine. So if we look at this paper here, betaine metabolism, and we look at food sources, we see it's mainly in beets. Beets are high in oxalate, and I really doubt Paul eats those. Spinach, definitely not, and grains as well. Won't eat them. Quinoa, wheats, oats, brown rice, barley. So you don't have that a lot in an animal-based diet or carnivore diet, and I believe that's the nutrient he's mainly deficient in. I really doubt maybe a little bit of folate, but I think we had folate on the blood work, had folic acid, and I don't think that's the case. I think he's lacking betaine. Choline, he's getting a lot of fatty meat, like chicken thighs, like with the skin, will have a lot of choline, eggs, and liver. So I think and the liver looks good, like on his blood work, so I don't think that is the issue. I do think it's betaine, and maybe very, very slight deficiency of B2 and B9, if anything, but I would say 90% of it comes from betaine. And unless Paul starts adding those foods here into his diet, he has to supplement with it with a supplement that would include betaine, or much better, a supplement that contains all the nutrients here from these two cycles, and that will cover all of it. So a really good one that I've been using myself, and I'm very happy with it. And my homocysteine was like at 13 and got down to 7.2 or 7.9. Is this one here. You can get it on Amazon, and you have here riboflavin, so vitamin B2, vitamin B6, folate, in a glucosamine salt, so it's very high in terms of bioavailability. Vitamin B12 that we have here as well. Paul doesn't lack it, but that comes with it. TMG, trimethylglycine, that is betaine, 900 milligrams. And L-serine can lower cortisol, so would work in Paul's favor for the DHA cortisol argument. But yeah, this is what we have here, and this will cover all of it. And what I like about this product here is they're all in their bioavailable form. So we have it here, B6 as P5P. Your body can use it right away. Another product here is from Thorne. This one here, very good as well. They just changed the formulation, so it was off Amazon a while, and they added betaine TMG, and we have it here. This is 3 capsules, and very similar to the other one. I prefer the other one. It's 2 capsules, and the betaine TMG is a little bit lower. And from my research, I've seen that there's no long-term research supplementing betaine that high. So I would just fulfill the daily needs there, see if homocysteine goes down. If it's still up, we could always play around with the doses, but most likely there's something off there as well. So spend a lot of time on homocysteine, but that's how important it is. So let's move on. All right, prolactin. If prolactin is too high, a lot of times that can result in man boobs for guys, and lack of motivation, lower motivation. So high prolactin is inverse to dopamine, so low prolactin often means high dopamine, high drive. It goes lower when we cut out alcohol and increase vitamin B6. T3 and T4, and the reason they're called T3, T4 thyroid hormone is at the top of your thyroid gland and has 4 iodine molecules, and T3 is at the bottom, has 3 iodine molecules, and about 75% of T4 gets converted into the liver to T3, and the higher T3, generally the higher metabolic rate, so your resting metabolism, the more calories you burn at rest. So optimizing T3, mainly selenium that you get from Brazil nuts, you can get it from tuna, I think shrimps as well, helps with that. Vitamin A, you have it eggs, liver, cod liver. These are like the key nutrients that support elevated levels or higher levels. You don't want them too high of T3, and that can give you higher metabolism, higher metabolic rate. T4, mainly iron and iodine are the 2 key players here that help with that. If you don't eat a lot of seafood, then there's always a risk that the T4 goes lower. But in Paul's case, it looks very good. Conversion pathways as well, like the ratio here is good. Also getting enough carbs. If you're too low carb, then that can reduce T3 thyroid hormone and eventually slow down your metabolism. So we don't want that. B12, as you can see, way over the range. This is good. Folic acid, it says over 20. I'd like to see the number, not over 20, but we'll take it here. So that's why I thought it's more the betaine TMG and not that he's lacking vitamin B9. So testosterone, very interesting here. Paul says he's not on TRT. He doesn't look like he's on TRT, and the blood work clearly shows it. But one thing that I believe he's overlooked is his free T. So his total T is very, very good, 814. And when we look at how much he's converting, so we see here how much he's converting, 804
15 total, so 12.5. So Paul is converting 1.5% of his testosterone. I like to see it at 2.5. So if we do 8.14, I think he could aim for a free T of 16.28. Obviously, it's not all the numbers, it's how you feel. So if 5 days out of the week he is waking up with erections, morning wood, that's already good. And if he has high libido, high levels of energy, the mental competitiveness, he seems to have all of that. So I don't think he has low levels of any of that there. But I do believe he could be converting better. And a lot of his testosterone is locked into SHBG. So how I like to describe these three are: your total T is your total revenue, and your free T is how much profit you make, and your SHBG is how much taxes you pay. So if you can lower the taxes, you will have more profit out of the total revenue, and therefore you keep more for yourself and you have more cash flow. And your free T, or the free T, is kind of like the cash flow, so how much is ready, buy, available, he can use every single day. I think his could be higher, and there are a few things that optimize that ratio. So omega-3 fatty acids have been shown to improve it a little bit. I don't think Paul eats a lot of seafood, so he's probably going to be slightly deficient there. I know, grass-fed or grass-finished regenerative beef has a little bit of omegas, but usually it's not sufficient. I would love to see Paul getting in omega-3 labs to confirm that. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe not. Other one is insulin. So the more carbs we eat, specifically like starches, it will spike insulin levels up a little bit, and that will lower SHBG, will free up more testosterone. And then we have boron. Boron is a mineral that you would get from, actually I just checked, boron is a trace element, not a mineral, that you would get from these foods. So not aware that Paul eats any of those, maybe avocado. So if he had a little bit more avocado in his diet, maybe some prunes, some dry prunes, I could see him do that. I really doubt he's going to have peanuts, kidney beans, red wine, or grapes there. So if we look at research, boron supplementation, if we look at this study here, they supplement with 10 milligrams of boron every day with breakfast, and they found it lowered SHBG levels and increased their levels of free testosterone. There's more research to be made there, but from anecdotal experience, I've seen a lot of clients, and including myself, their free T went up a lot higher. So it depends how open someone is to supplementing with it, and depends how open Paul is to supplementing with that. But I feel he put a little bit too little emphasis on the free T and too much on the total. He's like, oh, it's 800, and look, this is what it looks like when I'm healthy. But I believe a point that he missed is this here. I just made a post 2 days ago on Instagram around this, and when we look at these graphics, they took 3 big studies and they looked at testosterone levels. And if you look at testosterone levels from like 20 to 80, they go from like 750 on average down to 600 in the one study. In the other one, they go down around like 500, and here a little bit lower, but the decline is not that big. So I've seen guys in their 60s looking at their labs, they had total testosterone levels of 6, 7, 8, 900, like very, very high budget of testosterone, but their free T was down in the toilet. And when we look at free testosterone levels, the decline is much more dramatic with all the 3 studies here done. And this really shows that your free T is way more important to at least not overlook and optimize, versus you could go year in, year out, decade in, decade out to the doc and get your own blood work in and see, hey, my testosterone is always good. It's fine, it's good. I'm healthy, right? I'm 600, but why is my libido lower? Why are my levels of energy lower? Why do I wake up with less of a tent and less frequently? And did you look at your free T? Very, very important to look at free levels of testosterone, because the decline there is like this, where the total goes like this and a lot of times stays with a very small decline, and it can mask a lot of the symptoms that are going on. All right, getting to the end here, LH, FSH levels stimulate the testicles to produce more testosterone. This is fine, maybe a little bit elevated, so could be that he's eating too little carbs for his activity, or he needs to increase a little bit his body fat to like 12%, and that may improve as well the free levels of testosterone and give the brain a little bit of a break to not work that hard. So I think the LH could be a little bit lower in my opinion from what I've seen, also his levels of body fat. Iron is fine, looks pretty good, the whole iron panel here. He had like a little bit elevation in the saturation, but I know he said he donates blood. Depending if he cooks with an iron skillet, that could be the case there as well, but really no concern here on my end. Lipoprotein A, genetic risk factor, I think the biggest one for cardiovascular event. Paul has very low genetic risk factors here, so another argument in his hypothesis or his central argument that, hey, my cholesterol is high, but my metabolic health is good and my genes are good, so less likely that something's going to happen here to Paul. Estradiol slightly elevated, so boron can also help decreasing estradiol levels, and I think he definitely benefit from that there as a supplement. Whether he takes it or not, that's another thing. So that's pretty much it from his labs. I think overall it's very good blood work. There are very small things to optimize that I think Paul will get a better ROI there. And look at, probably homocysteine is the lowest hanging fruit for him there to fix and will give him the biggest ROI, especially for also cardiovascular risk, where the other things are small optimizations and fine tuning, and I think he's doing a lot of things right. So if you guys enjoy this, then give me a thumbs up and comment below if you want to see more lab reviews and whose labs I should review next.